Imagine this. You're in a fleet surrounded by compadres and friends headed to enemy territory, ready to take a bad fight, even if it means losing, just in the name of fun and content. Then you arrive. You and your opponents lock eyes. You're ready to give them a good, honorable fight, and while you don't expect true fairness, indeed you suspect you'll probably even end up losing, you hope they'll at least make it interesting. And seemingly, inevitably, they do not. Before you can blink, your opponents respond with an overwhelming force that render you and your interloping comrades into ash. The Blob has won yet again. A common line of thinking from those who get trampled by a blob goes something like this. Well, if the larger group just immediately defeats us and decides to offer no mercy, and therefore we don't get any enjoyment out of it, we'll just stop coming by, we'll deny them future fights. What are they going to do when they get bored? Well, the fallacy in this way of thinking is that it assumes that the smaller group has the power to dictate the terms of engagement with the larger group. By valuing the threat to deny the larger group future fights, the smaller group is implicitly assuming that the larger group values their presence and their participation in these fights enough to change their behavior in response to the threat. In reality, bigger groups may not care whether or not the smaller group continues to engage with them in the future. They may be perfectly content to continue defending their territory and resources without any interference from the smaller group. Assuming that the sole purpose of engaging in PvP fights is to have fun and enjoy the experience is a mistake. While this may be true for some players, for others, PvP is a means to an end, such as gaining control of resources, expanding territory, or defending assets. It's really not even that selfish to imagine, really. Just picture you're in a big group of capsuleers just sitting around in your home sector. Suddenly, a group of interlopers appears. You rush to your ship, ready your arms, and report for duty. But wait, you're not allowed. You're told, we have enough people to handle these interlopers, and if they brought you along, it would be unfair to the enemy. Sorry, capsuleer, you can't go. Do you see how absurd that is? By demanding impromptu fair fights, smaller groups effectively ruin the lineman experience for larger groups via exclusions if they oblige. Therefore, threatening to deny future fights is not a reliable or effective way to influence the behavior of a larger group. Instead, smaller groups should approach PvP with a realistic understanding of the power dynamics at play and be prepared to accept the consequences of their actions. So what can be done for smaller groups interested in getting fights with bigger groups who have realistic expectations? Well, one possible way of getting more sporting fights with those big groups is to build a reputation as an honorable and respectable PvPer who adheres to a certain code of conduct in your engagements. This reputation can be built by, of course, demonstrating good sportsmanship and avoiding griefing and harassing people, but more crucially, engaging in fair fights, maybe fights that you lose, maybe delivering content to people and getting to know people you fight with, especially those that defeat you. I mean, reach out to those people. Smaller groups can try to establish relationships with members of larger groups by talking to them in local and in DMs. This is how frenemy-style relationships are often formed, and a lot of the times, smaller groups can get a chunk of bigger groups' action just by hitting them up. Another thing you can do, and a lot of people probably won't want to do this, but if you record your fights, right, and then make some content out of it, you're essentially turning the people you fight into subjects, and they love to watch your side of it, right? You can build really good relationships with people if you record your fights and then show them afterwards, right? It's really cool. And with bigger groups, you can force a reputation this way if you're clever and are willing to take risks and are decent socially. So really, the best thing you can do to get fights is to, beyond just scheduling them outright, think about why they want to fight you. Why do they want to shoot things just like you do, but they don't have the same limitations on people? Try to develop strategies that play around that. This is why people do stuff like nano gangs and blopsing and stuff like that, because they know they're outnumbered. They want to do something a little hard to catch, and you can probably find a middle ground between that if you're a small, medium-sized FC trying to get content out of groups like Horde, Frat, and Goons and whatnot, right? Build a fleet composition that makes sense, understanding that you are the underdog and you're not going to get a fair fight. But don't go total chicken shit, or you run the risk of damaging your reputation. This is the kind of thing I want you to think about. Indeed, then, we can conclude that it is foolish for smaller groups to get disappointed when big groups don't match their numbers and strength in honorable combat, because the concept of fairness in PvP engagements in EVE can be subjective and difficult to define. For example, smaller groups may feel that it's unfair for bigger groups to escalate to capital ships, but from the perspective of the larger group, it may be seen as a legitimate strategy for achieving their goals or maintaining dominance or just shaking rust off of the caps. Furthermore, Capsuleers have the freedom to play however they want. There's no rule or expectation that PvP engagements should be evenly matched or fair. It's a sandbox. Players are free to use any tactics or strategies that they choose, including deception, ambushes, and overwhelming force, to the point where it would be almost absurd to expect anything less. In the end, EVE is a game of strategy and tactics, and the most successful players are those who are able to adapt to changing situations and use all of the available tools and resources to achieve their goals, rather than relying on the feeble notion of fairness or what you should be owed or what other people might do for you. Remember this: the Blob didn't rain on your parade. You did that all on your own by traveling to the storm clouds and demanding special treatment from the heavens. And just as a thunderstorm would shrug you off as the insignificant fly you are, so does the Blob. The only fool is one standing in the rain with no umbrella, wondering how they got wet.